Welcome to the folks that are just joining. So we do have a tight agenda today because we are hoping to keep this to the lunch hour. So we are going to probably go ahead and get started, and we might have some additional people join us here, and we'll maybe have to catch them up in the Q&A. But I wanted to start off and just say thank you again for all of you joining today. We are collecting input for the Twin Cities Climate Action Plan, and we will spend a bulk of today in discussion. So I am Amanda Cohn. I'm a sustainability project manager. I work across the system, and I'll be sort of your host today. I will be bouncing in between breakout rooms, keeping us on track, and giving a little bit of a brief presentation here up front to the group so that we're all starting with the same background information. But with us today, we also have some sustainability staff members, sustainability interns, and members of our Twin Cities Sustainability Committee and more that will be helping with the facilitation of breakout groups. So I also wanted to thank them for their time and commitment today as well. We will have some time for question and answer prior to the breakout groups. And so feel free to use the chat, and our team will do our best to answer those in the chat, and anything remaining we can also speak to when we get to the question and answer portion of today's workshop. If you'd like to stay informed, you can scan this QR code. That will sign you up for climate action planning updates if you're not already on our list. This is just our first phase of engagement. We have 2 more after this. And so we hope that you'll stay connected and stay in touch and stay informed in the process and participate in those future phases. So with those announcements, we'll go ahead and start to dig in to climate action history. I will send a link to this PDF for anyone interested in reading through this a bit more. But really what I want to highlight here is that we signed a commitment in 2008 to reduce our climate emission or carbon emissions and be carbon neutral by 2050 in 2008. So we've been at this a while, and we have a previous climate action plan that was created in 2011. So this is somewhat of an update, but we've completed a lot of things from that last plan, which did lead us to a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. But this plan will really be thinking about that last 50, thinking in the next 10 years until we create our next climate action plan. What are we setting out to achieve and to accomplish? Some of the action highlights from that previous plan that we have accomplished is that we have a new energy plant that's a combined power plant that has really improved efficiencies and reduced emissions. We've installed solar, lots of energy efficiency projects, and some other additional resiliency building measures, such as installing more stormwater and green infrastructure on campus, to also be thinking about the flip side of the coin. So we really have focused on emissions, but you'll see in this presentation, we are starting to think more about adaptation and resiliency in our climate action planning work as well. So that leads me to this slide. What is a climate action plan, and what's the focus for the Twin Cities campus? A climate action plan can be lots of different things. If you look at examples, it can be really tailored to the organization, to the business, to the city, to the state. And for us in this first year, it's going to be focused on emission reductions in these 5 different areas. One, because they are some of our highest areas of emissions, they're in our operational control, and they're really visible and can be really good piloting and learning opportunities, not just for us, but for others around the state. And then the other question we set out to answer is, how do we build resilience on campus, and thinking about our role in the context of the city and being a strength and making sure that we're ready for climate change so we can continue to be an asset for our community. We recognize that with those 2 questions, we won't be able to answer everything. So we're also being diligent to track other questions that we know that we'll need to answer in the future. Again, here's just a sampling of those questions. And so if in conversation today, you bring up a topic area that isn't connected to those two questions that we aim to answer through the climate action planning, that's okay. We're documenting it. We want to know what's important to our community, so that can also inform our efforts moving forward. Within those two questions, we do have a baseline assessment for our elimination of greenhouse gas inventory or greenhouse gases. So we have an inventory, we know where those emissions come from. In this graphic, the stationary combustion refers to that heating and cooling component of our buildings here on campus, and other things that are kind of built infrastructure, built in place, is where those emissions are coming from. We also have emissions, again, from purchased electricity, commuting, air travel, and new fleet are the other emissions that we're really focused on. When we're thinking about climate adaptation and resilience, we don't have that same baseline assessment. And so that is something that we'll be working on, is to create in this planning process, is really to look at the risk and vulnerability on campus and to see where those risks and vulnerabilities lie, so that we can start to address them with strategies in our future phases of work. And so I have on the next slide a little bit of how we are thinking about the emissions plan structure. So we have these different elements: energy supply, commuting, university fleet. And within each of those elements, we'll be setting goals of how we would like to progress in our next 10 years. These are broad brush, ambitious, aspirational statements. Next, we'll be thinking about the key performance indicators related to those goals. So how will we know when we have been successful? Are there interim milestones that we're aiming for? And then we'll also have prioritized strategies and implementation steps or sets of blueprints to really help us lay out the how, the when, who, all of that good stuff, to how we will achieve those goals. So this next graphic is the same, but it provides a little bit of background in the green, the new additions to this graphic, on process. And so through each of these different stages of the planning process, we are doing engagement and thinking about our governance structure and how do we get information out to the broader community? How do we take information in and get it to the correct people who are doing some of the behind the scenes work? Some of that behind the scenes work includes thinking about our core values, which will be used to prioritize strategies. We're also developing a strategic framework that will help us develop strategies that are in implementation steps that go beyond just that built infrastructure. It's also thinking about how do we build a campus culture? How do we think about external collaboration, and really think about all types of strategies that will help us advance our goals. Here's our timeline. So you can see that we are still in this first bullet point here of setting goals, thinking about our risk and vulnerability assessment, and identifying barriers and values that we all have in common and that are different. And then we'll use that information to head into strategy development and prioritization early in the new year. Then we will be presenting that out to the broader community and saying, this is what we heard sort of in phase 1 and 2, and getting feedback on that. And then moving into the implementation steps when we've confirmed what those prioritized strategies are, and aiming to really finalize all of the little details of the plan over this summer in 2023. So I've been mentioning this phase of work. This is our engagement phase. So you can see how it directly relates to our timeline showed in the previous slide, that we are going to continue to collect input. So now we're in phase 1. We've been doing a lot of workshops, meetings with organizations, building relationships. In phase 2, we will have an online survey that everyone can participate in. And then in phase 3, we plan to return to groups that we've met with in phase 1 and phase 2 to say, these are our results. Is anything missing from that? Does this still resonate with you? How have things changed? How are they the same? And really start to have the beginning of conversations of moving into implementation. So you may be asking, okay, that's your strategy for engagement, but who are you talking to? And it's a lot of people, and we're trying to coordinate different groups of people as well. So here is our group on sort of our engagement governance structure. We can put these into different buckets, if you will. So university voices, external partners and advisors, the sustainability committee, both at the system-wide and Twin Cities, and university leadership. We have different strategies for reaching all of these different folks, and happy to go into that in the Q&A if it's of interest. One thing I do want to highlight here is we have working groups comprised of faculty, staff, and students, and they are really helping us do some of the legwork, some of the analysis, having deep conversation on goals and strategies, and bringing in all of the different data points, whether that's research, whether it's data from operations, and whether it's bringing in information from meetings like this. They're helping to synthesize that and to help bring in results so that we can come back in that phase 3 of engagement and report it back out to all of you. So your information that you share with us today will go to that working group. And that's how we'll really be using today's input from you all in our process. Again, this is what I just described, and so I won't go into great detail here, but to those that may be joining us today from a working group, again, we really thank you for the time that you have committed to this effort. And so with that, we have some time for Q&A before we move into our phase 1 questions and breakouts. But here's a list of what we will be talking about. And we can put a copy of these also in the chat when we head to breakouts. So with that, I know that's a whirlwind. We had to shorten our presentation for our hour meeting today. So happy to answer some questions from the group. So I do see one in the chat, so I'll just read that out loud for our recording. As a public institute, how does the University of Minnesota plan to expand this climate action to greater Minnesota, specifically implement learn strategies outside of the university campus? I think that's a great question. I think that's something that we do strive to do. I think there's a couple of different ways to do that. One is through our extension offices and making sure that we're thinking about their ability to get information out as we're thinking through implementation steps. Also thinking about our ability to pilot projects. And so thinking about how can we showcase different strategies on campus and really see how they work, what works well. And also thinking about training the next set of leaders and thinkers and doers through classroom engagement, through having living learning communities, living laboratories on campus. And so I think those are strategies that we definitely will want to include in the climate action plan. Susanna, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. So as I was looking through the areas of work and where we need to reduce our emissions, and one of them is commuting. All the other ones, it seemed to me, are things that the university as an institution has control over, like the power, the power plant, that sort of thing. It seems like that one is significantly different because it depends on each individual person who's trying to get to the U every day. And I don't know if we'll be talking about this in the breakout room. I'm just wondering how to handle that, which is, I think, a very different animal than something that the U controls in its own physical plant.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I hope we can all find room to see ourselves in every sector of emissions. Even though we control our energy plant, we all can do our part in reducing the energy that we use. And thinking about, do we turn up our furnace a degree or do we put on an extra layer? That's a simple action that we all can be a part of. So I think on the commuting piece, there is certainly some differences in strategies of thinking through motivation, incentives, policies, and also working with those external partners. As you mentioned, like some of that is outside of our control. And so how do we use our influence and think about partnerships? But we also see that in thinking through some of our other sectors as well. And Excel Energy has goals to clean the grid, and it's important for us to understand that, and also encourage that, support that, know that as a large energy user, we're interested in buying that type of electricity. And so I think as we dig into the complexities of each of the emission groups, we see that we do control quite a bit of it, but we can even, I mean, to the point of the first question, our impact might even be bigger if we think about those external collaborations and partnerships. So let's see, I think this was a comment, and so I'm looking for, okay, here's another question. What is the interest effort towards connecting with local government officials? And Matthew, who asked, is part of the local citizens climate lobby, and they're interested in working more with the university, among other things. So I can say that we are in the relationship building phase with a lot of our government officials. I just moved to Minnesota over the summer, and so I'm having meetings with them now and meeting them for the first time. So I think we definitely see interest there and see shared goals there. They also have commitments to reduce and eliminate their emissions. And so I think we have opportunities there to share resources, knowledge, and again, think through those partnerships. So I would say we're definitely interested. And we've also been meeting with some of the neighborhood association, either staff and volunteers for those around campus. And so we are thinking about how to make those connections and again, expand the work, because our boundary, climate doesn't care about a boundary of campus or care about a boundary of the state, right? We have to think beyond that and really think about those shared values. So I think we are interested, and it'll probably, again, look different depending on what topic we're hoping to take on and what challenge we're trying to address. I see another question here. How can we change the paradigm of students asking for employment to students asking for future employers when it comes to employers' impact? Let me reread that again. I don't know that I quite understand the question. Does someone on our team want to take a stab at rephrasing it, or Jamie, do you want to come off mute and or retype and rephrase for us?
Yeah, the key here is as a student, it feels like I have to ask a lot of I have to be involved in trying to get an employer to like me as a person. Whereas I feel like there needs to be a lot of change in students' abilities to ask of employers the ability to change when it comes to climate change.
Okay, so it's kind of thinking through, let me see if this answer, or starts at least the conversation. I don't know that I can answer it fully. But I think even in the university space, we think about what makes students choose University of Minnesota. Is sustainability a factor in that? And I think it is. I think for a lot of students, it really is. And thinking through where do I go to school? Who do I work for? What are their climate policies? And I think that does drive some of the market as students really start to look and think through that. I think, and there's never going to be one solution to any problem. I think another piece of that is students joining companies and businesses and bringing ideas that they learn here at the university to those. And so also thinking about the influence that you have as a student, as an employee, to really bring new ideas that you can learn from not only at the university, but other partners here in the Twin Cities that are doing good work in the sustainability field, and really being an advocate through those years as you join different organizations and bring that skill and expertise to those organizations.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions here? Jeffrey.
Yeah. So I guess one of my questions is about efforts of connecting with classes actually to bring in more sustainability focused projects. For example, I'm actually teaching a course over the summers involving measurements for mechanical engineering. And something that I'm interested in doing is having the final projects that are measurement based have some connection to community. And I'm wondering about, forging a connection, with the climate action group for any types of measurements that are related to sustainability, but also just more generally, connecting with other courses and instructors to see what role students can play in gathering beyond just, the local working group.
Yeah, we would love to connect with you, Jeffrey. So I'm glad that you're here, and I hope let's plan to follow up after this session. Carly, I would love to tap you because I know you do so much work with professors and with students in courses, and if you could speak to that, I think you probably have the most knowledge on our staff team of ways that we've done that in the past.
Yeah, thanks, Jeffrey. That's a fantastic idea. And we've got a couple on this call from our sustainability education area of INE, Mary Hahnemann and Beth Mercer-Taylor, who are wonderful, wonderful resources. So I don't know if you've connected with them previously. I'd be happy to make a connection there. Also, I'd be happy to chat with you later on to see, where there could be some areas of connection with your class and in the climate action plan. So I will go ahead and send you an email and we can chat offline.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, and so we've connected individually with students. We've also worked with courses to develop projects that are class-wide or semester-wide. And so there is a lot of flexibility there. And I love that it's thinking about measurement because the key performance indicators, as we think about those for the climate action plan, some of them are harder to measure, and maybe we don't measure them right now. And how can we start measuring them? How do we automate them? Those are a lot of questions that I think we are faced with and will need to continue to figure out as we go into implementation. So we are at time here for question and answer, and I'm not seeing any other hands. So I think it is time for us to move into breakout sessions. So Carly's been busy at work putting everyone into a breakout room, I believe.